Well, I'd like to just start off by bragging on God. Is that all right? Okay. You know, God created this human body, and it's composed of about 80 to 100 trillion cells. In the cell, there are various chemicals. In fact, everything on this planet is made out of chemicals. That's made out of chemicals. The rug, the concrete, your clothes. They're all made out of chemicals. In fact, God made this whole planet out of 92 chemical elements. Man has used a few isotopes to make 20 more. A chemical element is a chemical that you cannot break down any further. And so God made this cell. You may not be able to see this, but we got some things up there you might be able to see. Made the cell. And inside, there's probably approximately 100,000 chemical reactions occurring each second in the cell. So, let's talk about this cell for a minute. God put 27 chemical elements in this cell. So this cell is made out of 27 chemical elements. And he has approximately 20,000 enzymes, which combine with those 27 chemicals to produce over 100,000 chemical reactions a second. So I think if I would write, see this little dot I just put there? That would represent about 10, maybe 15 cells that we have. Now we have different type of cells. All cells don't look like this. A bone cell, nerve cell, muscle cell, maybe a blood cell would look something like this. So you have different structures. They all have different functions, but they all have the same chemistry. I got a break there. So all we got to do is learn how the chemistry of this cell works. So let's say this was 100,000 chemical reactions. I'm not going to be able to do that because I'll be here all night. But let's just take one of them. Now, how does these 20,000 enzymes work with these chemicals? This is a substrate. Let's say it's shaped like this. Somewhere in there, there's a specific substrate that fits right in here. I hope I can do this. I am the worst artist in the world. But see how that works in the cell? It fits in there and it breaks down the substrate. So that's what I'm trying to point out to you. Every enzyme is responsible for every chemical reaction in the body. I'm in the belief that we ought to start treating the cause of all illness, which is chemical. It's because everything's made out of chemicals. And if you come to me and you're sick, to me, you just have abnormal chemistry. That's the way I look at these things. So, chemicals. Now, there are 7 things that you must do in order for me to help you get better if you're sick. Number 1 is nutrition. If I don't feed the cell these 27 chemicals in their proper amounts, you'll never get well. This is where most of the illnesses start. We're not feeding the cell those 27 chemicals in their proper amounts. And you start having different things created. So, I'm going to talk in detail about nutrition. How are we going to feed those 27 chemicals in their proper amounts? That's the first thing. The second thing, every cell that I've ever seen has to have oxygen. I got to thinking about, why do we need oxygen? Well, Sir Isaac Newton answered that question for me. He was my idol. Everybody else in my years had Mickey Mantle on their board. I had Newton, so I'm a nerd. But Newton says that nothing will move unless it's acted upon by an outside force. So oxygen goes into these old mitochondria in the cell, and it produces energy. It'll produce ATP. You ever heard of that big word? I said, that's your energy. That's what makes you move, is ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And so oxygen will go in here and come out as ATP, and it has about 8 calories of energy per mole. Now, you don't like the word calorie, but that's important that you have calories here. So, calories. And that's what causes these enzymes to move. ATP will push this enzyme to find its substrate. You see. How many of you are tired all the time? This may be a problem right here with you creating ATP. It could be, there are other causes. But it could be that you just don't have any mitochondria. Now, I used to be the Olympic physiologist for America, and I had the privilege of testing the marathon runners. Now, these guys run 26 miles, 285 yards, and they average 4 minutes and 30 seconds a mile. Pretty good shape, aren't they? Yeah, well, I started looking at their gastroc and rectus femoris muscle and testing them, and I found that they had over 2,000 mitochondria in their gastrocnemius calf muscle and running muscle here. Boy, I was shocked. I didn't know that. This was back in 1984. And since then, I've been testing world-class athletes, and a guy named Lance Armstrong, I don't know if I should mention his name here, but he had 2,300. He broke my lab record of mitochondria. And so if he wanted to bicycle over that mountain, he had the energy to do it. How would you like to have energy like that? Just tremendous energy, you see. So the next thing is we've got to exercise if we want to create energy. You have to. There's no getting around it. If you don't want to do some kind of exercise, I'm not saying you have to ride over a mountain or run a marathon. I'm just saying you got to do some exercise if you want to get well. There are 3 types what you got to do. First of all, you got to do cardio. This is where you make your heart beat faster. You can walk a mile, walk a half a mile, depending on how fit you are. But you've got to walk or jog or ride your bike or swim or stationary to get your heart up. And you ought to do it 5 days a week. That would be ideal if you can do that. But don't start off hard now if you've never exercised, because you'll have ligaments sticking out of your bleeding out of the nose. So I want you to take your time. Some of you are getting older. You don't need to do that. That no pain, no gain doesn't work. Okay. All right, the second thing is you got to pump iron, muscle endurance. You got to develop your strength. And you got to develop your strength at all your joints that move. We call them diathrottle joints. Your fingers move. We got horror stories about senior adults that can't open their medicine. So squeeze. Your wrist. Get you a 1 pound. You can do 1 pound. Turn it over and do it that way. Elbow. Do this. Do that. How many of you want to get the fat off the back of your arm? All right, I won't talk about it. Do this. That help tighten up that tricep muscle. Look at your shoulder. You got all kind of movements, you know. inward, outward. Your trunk, you can go down and back in your head, to the side. Do all these movements, rotate. You see. Look at your hip. It's a ball and socket. It goes way out, comes back, up, back. Anybody got any music? I'm feeling excited here. It goes up and back, you see. Look at your knee. It just goes down and up. Your toe up and down. But you got to put an overload on those. And you need to do that 3 days a week. Number 3, flexibility. Boy, this is what's happened to our Americans. We've lost our flexibility. If you strengthen a muscle, like your fingers, stretch them, pull them apart, push them back, hang from a little bar. Walk through a door, stretch your shoulders. Sit down, walk back, you see. Touch your toes. Do all kind of flexibility. Or you're going to end up with a senior adult shuffle. You see, you don't need to lose your flexibility. That's the fastest thing you can develop in fitness is flexibility if you just work at it. So do that every single day of your life. You ever seen an old cat? What will he do? He'll get up and stretch, and that's what you need to do, stretch. Okay. So number 2 is exercise. Number 3, let's just talk about enzymes if I'm talking about all this and how important they are. Enzymes get in your body 2 natural ways. First of all, your DNA makes it. Now that's pretty complicated. But the other way is raw food. I'm going to give a prescription right here, first one. You are to eat a raw salad every day. Because if you eat cooked foods, there's no enzymes. Enzymes start denaturing at 115 degrees. And I don't know of any enzyme that can live past 161 degrees. So when you eat cooked foods, you get no live enzymes. And so now you have to depend on your DNA in your nucleus to do it. And I'm going to show you this because I'm not going to talk down to you. And we got some intelligent people in here. And you're back in class. So let's look at the nucleus here. In the nucleus, if you remember correctly, there's chromosomes. There's 23 pair, if you're hopefully. Okay? What are chromosomes made of? They're made of genes. Boy, I like this. This is something I'm so excited about nobody even knows. I got a computer chip that's got every gene on it. Isn't that amazing? We've mapped out the genome. Does anybody understand the significance of that? We're going to make medicine today look barbaric in 5 years. I got some buddies that are really smart that are learning how to splice those bad genes out that we already know where sickle cell anemia is. We already know where a lot of these diseases are. If we can learn to cut them out and then put the good one in, we're going to be able to heal some of these problems. It's exciting. We're going to use stem cells research. It's amazing what's going on right now. So, 40,000 genes. What's in a gene? There's where you find your DNA. You remember your little double helix? That's the worst one I ever drawn. Good gosh, that's sick. That DNA is sick. He's going to die. Okay. Your DNA. They got better pictures on the wall if y'all can see all that. But the DNA, how many of you remember your T and A and C and G? Some of you nurses remember that? Okay, it's still there if you don't remember that. Well, T always goes with A and C always goes with G, doesn't it? Well, sometimes T will go with G. because of oxidative stress, free radicals that are created and so forth, like runners. Runners create a lot of free radicals, and these free radicals go crazy inside here and upset the thiamine or adenosine or whatever, and it gets out of whack. It's altered. When you alter this, we call this cancer, because cancer is alteration of your DNA. And so you got little repair enzymes that go up and down your DNA that tells old thiamine, get back there with adenosine. I don't know if it talks like that, but it gets back. It pushes it back is what it does, you see. Every one of you in here have cancer. You have cancer. You may have 1,000 to 10,000 cells that have already been altered. And if it wasn't because of these little repair enzymes that go up and down there, you would get full-blown cancer. So you see how critical these little repair enzymes are. I call them indoles and phenols. And I learned some foods that got all of that in there. And so the most important thing for you to do is to eat this food to get your immune system strong. Because this is where the immune system works, right here, you see. Now, what does DNA produce? Well, it makes amino acids. And these amino acids are 20 of them. You're made up of 20, actually 22, but 2 are very rare. So we say 20 amino acids. This may be phenylalanine, aspartic acid, valine, tryptophan, all those big words. But this is where I started believing in God. I'm a scientist, and I have to measure things. I have to see things. I hate to say that, but I had to. I saw these little things line up in the perfect sequence on every single one of them, just about. And there are 500 of them lengthwise. And that can't be random. So this is where I started believing in God. And how God makes those line up to make an enzyme. That's all an enzyme is these things all lined up in a certain way. So your enzymes are made up of 20 amino acids. Now I know that's pretty deep, but I hope to get back and try to explain to you why it's happening like this. Okay. So that's what enzymes are. You get them in raw food, and your DNA makes it. Now here's what's sad. When you reach age 40, not exactly that 40th birthday, but around 40, you start losing your DNA. It just doesn't make them anymore. Your body doesn't. So if you don't start making DNA, you see, doesn't start making the enzymes or the amino acids, then you're not going to make the right enzyme. You're going to have bad chemistry, and you're going to get sick. We lose almost 1,000 miles a day of DNA after you get around 40 years of age. Some of you sooner, some of you later. Now you say 1,000 miles? Yeah. Well, you want to look at God here for a minute, just a second? Let me just show you this. This is mind-boggling to me. You're not going to believe this. Inside each cell, or each gene, I should say, there's about 17 inches of DNA wound around. 17 inches. Is that about the width of that thing? Now we're talking small. That's 20 cells. Now we're in the nucleus. 17 inches. Well, how far would your DNA reach? If I could take all your DNA out of your cell and put them in the end, how far would it reach? Well, let's look here. Okay, you got 23 chromosomes times 17 inches times 40,000 times 100 trillion. Did you know your DNA would reach to the sun and back about 200 times? Are you smart enough to understand that? I'm not. I hope you are, because I can't. You see, so this is your God. This is your God, and the greatest thing he's ever, to me, that he's ever created was a human cell. I think it's the wonder among wonders of how that works. I've written 30 books on it. I've lectured all over the world, and I've come to one conclusion. I really don't know how it works. And if anybody says they do, I'd like to meet them. It's unbelievable how that works. So, enzyme. Now let's talk about the fourth thing we got to do. We got to get rid of waste out of the cell. When I look in people's cells, I see this all the time in my microscope. Oh, black stuff, about this color. Oh, dark gray, black. It's called medically lipofuscin. It has other names. It's made out of fat, lipo, lipids. It's called amyloids in the brain. That's Alzheimer's, right? I call it lipofuscin, and this is in the cells. Well, we got to get this waste out. Me and my colleagues believe if we can get the waste out of your cells, we could add 15 quality years to your life expectancy. Now, I think that's worth it, don't you? 15 quality years. Because what if that junk gets right here? Is that going to mess up your enzymes there? Man, then you're going to have circles, get sick all the time. So we got to get rid of the waste that's in here. Now, there are 3 ways we can do this. First of all, nutrition. Nutrition starts with an N, not an M. We're not going to eat as much fat. It's made out of saturated fat, if you really want to know. We're going to exercise. Now, you know, I've spent a lot of time with great athletes and marathon runners and track stars and unbelievable people. If you met them, you wouldn't believe it. And I've met all these people. But you know what the greatest thing about exercise is? It's not to make you look strong or to run or anything like that. It gets the waste out of your 100 trillion cells. The waste that you create. If you have 100,000 chemical reactions a second, are you going to have waste built up in your cell? If you don't go to the bathroom, you're going to have waste built up. You see, waste will kill you. So, waste. Exercise creates pressure inside your cell. And the waste will flow from high pressure to low pressure. Does that make sense? That's why all 11 systems of the body, the digestive, the endocrine, the reproductive, all the systems are improved when you exercise because you get the waste out. You think better, everything. You get the amyloids out. All this stuff is better when you exercise, you see. Third thing is hydration. This is a big problem in America. Hydration. You must hydrate more. You've got to drink water more. Hydrate.